So that was more the technical part of this webinar. Now the real introduction of the webinar is first to start with what we will not discuss today. So it will be a targeted webinar. We asked you to send us some questions beforehand. Thank you for those who have done that. It was very useful. And some of these questions, unfortunately, will not be discussed today, but the good news is that you can already find a lot of these answers to these questions in our frequently asked questions documents for coordinators. And here is the first of the many links that you will see in this presentation, the ones that are in blue and underlined. After the presentation, we will also give you access to the PDF version of this presentation, and there all these links will work as well. This way, if you want to know more, you can always click on it and you have the information immediately available. So what will we not discuss today? Everything that has to do with amendments to the grant agreement. We have received a couple of questions about those as well. When to submit an amendment, when not to do it, which changes are allowed by BBI-JU. Also some project-specific questions. If you have some project-specific questions, please contact your BBI-JU project officer, always, of course, via your coordinator, because this is not the focus of today's presentation. We'll also not be giving information about the next BBI-JU calls, about Horizon Europe, contributions to BIC, etc. We will really focus on reporting. Specifically, what will we discuss? We will talk about reporting in line with Horizon 2020. Specifically continuous reporting, periodic reporting, the scientific and the financial parts, and also the difference between reviews and periodic assessments. So BBI-JU, at the start, we have chosen to use most of the Horizon 2020 principles, rules, and regulations, which also allows us to use the whole Horizon 2020 IT infrastructure, the participants portal, for example. So if you have some experience with Horizon 2020, then most of the terminology here will sound logical to you. Then besides that, we also have some BBI-JU specific reporting, most of the annual reporting, and this is in line with some specificities that BBI-JU has as a public-private partnership. That's the in-kind, in-cash additional investments, but also our key performance indicators are BBI-JU KPIs. And then the last two parts of today will be presentations about audits. What is the audit process? What are some lessons learned? And also some communication guidelines. So all this information, how has this been translated into an agenda? Well, this is the one that you've already received beforehand as well. So in the same order as I just gave you an overview of everything that we'll discuss. So let's immediately delve into the first part of today, which is about continuous reporting and the scientific part of periodic reporting. And we chose to do these two presentations in one presentation or back to back because there is a clear link between these two. So allow us to explain a bit further. So first of all, continuous reporting. So continuous reporting, when you log into the participant portal and you go to your project, you will be also logging into an IT application called Sigma. Sigma stands for the System for Grant Management. And if you then go to your continuous reporting, there you will see 11 tabs in Sigma. And the 11 tabs, this is the continuous reporting. So you have 2 tabs that need to be completed on a continuous basis, typically on a monthly basis. That's the deliverables and the milestones. And the other 9 tabs, they can be continuously updated. But a full update is only necessary at the time of periodic reporting. So let's go a bit deeper into these 2 sets of tabs. So first of all, the deliverables and the milestones. Here in this section of Sigma, you will find a list of all the deliverables and all of the milestones. It's just a translation of what is mentioned in your grant agreement. And it's not only the list, but also the deadlines, the submission deadlines for deliverables and the achievement deadlines for milestones. Now, if you would submit your deliverable too late, or if a specific milestone would be reached later than expected, then we do expect you to explain that, to justify that in the periodic report, specifically section 5, deviations from the description of action. And if you see that there might be a delay with certain deliverables or milestones, please do keep your coordinator, and via your coordinator also the BBI-JU project officer, proactively informed via email about any delays. This really helps us as BBI-JU to also keep track of the progress of the project, But more importantly, if you as different participants keep your coordinator informed, that really helps your coordinator to play his or her role, namely to coordinate the project, because some delays for your deliverables might have a knock-on effect on other activities within the project. So please, 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 whenever there are delays, communicate. The other 9 tabs, well, there a continuous update is possible. What do we mean by that? Well, for example, whenever there's a new scientific publication that you have published, you can continuously update the tab Publications. Whenever you have registered a new patent, you can continuously update the tab Patents. So they're always open. You can always make updates of these different tabs. The thing is, the full update is only necessary, or is necessary, in order to be able to submit your periodic report. Specifically, when you see the green tick box, that means that that specific tab contains all the necessary information to submit the periodic report. You also have the orange triangles, which means that there is a non-blocking warning. It might be good to double check that specific tab before you submit your periodic report. It could be a false warning, but it could indeed be something more relevant. But you also have the red crosses, the blocking warnings, and as long as that has not been solved, then you will not be able to submit your periodic report. And in order to know what these red crosses and orange triangles are, if you click on the Validate button, you will receive a list, a bit more explanation of all the issues related to the orange triangles and the red crosses. So use this function, use the Validate function, very useful indeed. Now there is of course a link between the continuous and the periodic reporting. Why? Because as I already said, only when all the tabs are ready for submission, ideally the green checks, maybe here and there some orange triangles, it's only then that coordinators will be able to submit their periodic reports. And also different overview tables and documents are then, I would say, automatically created based on the input in these different tabs, like a summary for publication, the deliverables, etc. So therefore, it is actually recommended to keep all the tabs updated. So not only the 2 ones, deliverables and milestones, where there's an actual requirement to keep us updated of submissions of deliverables, achieving of milestones, but also the other 9. Why? Because it will save you considerable time during the preparation, the writing of your periodic reports. So have a look at them if you hadn't done so in a while. It could be very useful to save a lot of time later. Where can you find more information? Mainly on the Horizon 2020 online manual. There is a specific section dedicated to continuous reporting. And for each of these Sigma tabs that I just mentioned, you can find more information, not only textual information, including terminology, but also a lot of IT screenshots, a lot of screens via the green how-to buttons. We've realized that these how-to buttons are not always known. There are some, typically they're always, let's say, top right corner of the different screens of the Horizon 2020 online manual, but they're very useful indeed. So please don't forget to click on them. Typically give a lot of very valuable information on which different steps to take when, which screens you need to go through to do a lot of different things related to continuous reporting and other things as well. But also in our BBI GU Fact for Coordinators, section 211, you'll find a lot of information about continuous reporting. And because of this clear link that I already showed between continuous reporting on the one hand and periodic reporting, the scientific part on the other one, this is why we're going to do these 2 presentations now back to back. So when we think of periodic reporting, it is very similar to Horizon 2020. Why? Because BBI GU uses the same template for periodic reporting, which is available on the participant portal. So again, you see the blue link here. Once you get the PDF version, you can also click on this and then you will gain insight there as well. And the periodic report, just like in Horizon 2020, it has a specific structure. You have the technical part of the report and the financial part of the report. Financial part will be discussed in the next presentation. So let's now dig a bit deeper into the technical report, which, as you can see, is composed of 2 different parts, Part A and Part B. Now, Part A has a very specific structure, 8 to 9 headings. 8 to 9, why? Because the open research data one is only applicable to some projects. But if you compare these data with the continuous reporting tabs that we just discussed, you see that there is often a one-on-one link between these tabs and the headings in Part A of the periodic reports, the technical parts. Some exceptions, as you can see, dissemination and exploitation, there they group 4 different tabs together: publications, dissemination, patents, and innovation. And you also see this heading for ethical issues, if applicable. If they are applicable, they will have been translated into ethics deliverables, and these are elements that you're also able to find then in your list of deliverables. Some tips and tricks related to periodic reporting Part A. First of all, the summary for publication, please focus on a broad target audience, because this is the text that will be published after assessment and approval of every periodic report. So please ensure this is, let's say, the window to the world, or the window to your project from the world. So please double check the text that you write there, because it will be published also on European Commission publicly available databases. Deliverables, milestone, and ethical issues, so these ethics deliverables, please explain and justify any delays and modifications. You can do that in Part A, but you need to definitely do that in Part B of the periodic report. And when you're wondering which type of information should I give, well, just give enough information try to put yourself in our position as BBI-JU. What is the information that we would need to assess if this change is justified or not? And for some deliverables, that might require a bit more text than with others. And also, please double check the dissemination level of your deliverables. Why? Because all public deliverables will be published once they are approved on Cordis, which is the European Commission main database on EU-funded projects. And it's not enough for you to, if you see in your grant agreement that a deliverable had status confidential, but then along the way decide it's public, or actually worse, the other way around. The data that is in your grant agreement is the one that will be followed. So please double check when you submit your deliverables if the dissemination level is still applicable. If not, please inform your coordinator and contact BBI-JU as quickly as possible. And then the risk and mitigation actions. Please use the periodic report as an opportunity to reassess risks, to check if there were some unforeseen risks as well, and to update the risk and mitigation measures. We realize that during periodic reporting, we ask you to report on a lot of different things, but don't see this table just as a reporting requirement. Use it as a tool to continuously assess which risks your project is encountering, or if there are some unforeseen risks and how you could mitigate those risks. Then let's go to Part B of the periodic report, and this is the narrative part. It needs to be uploaded as a PDF document, which is different from Part A. Part A is a bit more, I would say, structured in a sense that it is based on the information that you have inputted in the continuous reporting data in Sigma. What should be the content of Part B? Well, explanation of the work carried out by beneficiaries during the reporting period. And please also use the structure of Part B. We have a specific template for that, again, very similar to Horizon 2020, which contains 5 headings. Not surprising, the first one, the work carried out during that specific period and the overview of the progress. And then you have 4 other sections which are noted as if applicable. So the update of exploitation dissemination plan, data management plan, follow-up of recommendations and comments from previous reviews, or deviations from Annex 1 and Annex 2. So why are these, because that's a question that we're often asked, why does it say if applicable? What does this mean? It's because Part B of the periodic report uses what we call a variance approach, meaning the question is asked, how different are the activities that you have performed during that period with what is described in the description of action? So the main focus on writing Part B of your periodic report should be on describing the changes compared to the grant agreement. Of course, if there aren't that many changes, that's good, because then you will also have less to write. If there are some significant changes, please clearly describe and justify them. Another question that we're often asked is, how long should Part B be? Well, different ways to answer that question. there are no page limits, but there are a couple of guidelines that are mentioned. For example, it says that the report should be concise and readable, and any duplication should be avoided. So if possible, make cross-references where applicable, where possible. If you're already describing a specific issue in one part, and it is also asked, a similar question is also asked in another part of the periodic report, just refer to it, explain it very clearly in one part and refer to it in the other part. And also know that contrary, for example, to the publishable summary, for the Part B, this is information that will not be published to the outside world, meaning that you are writing for, I would say, an informed target audience. So this will something that will be read by BBI-JU in order to make the assessment of the periodic report, but also some review experts who also have access to your grant agreement, etc. So know that you're writing for an informed audience. We have access to the same confidential documents as you do, so it's not necessary to repeat certain things that are already clearly described in your grant agreement. Some other questions that were often asked is, okay, so on top of the last periodic report, should I also submit a final report? The answer to that one is no, which is contrary to FP7. This is probably why we receive that question still, because once the last periodic report has been assessed and approved by BBI-JU, then a final report will be automatically created, and that contains mainly the publishable summary of the entire project. And where can you find more information about what to write, what not to write? Well, BBI-JU has recently created a template of Part B, which will be included in our next version of the FAC4 coordinators, but as a bit of, let's say, a pre-screening, you can already click on it via this once you receive the PDF of this presentation. But you can also find a lot more information on the participant portal again, and the Horizon 2020 online manual, because there are specific sections on periodic reporting and final reporting. Similarly to continuous reporting, you can find information about the terminology, always important, but also a lot of, again, IT screenshots via the green how-to buttons. And I already mentioned it, the FAC4 coordinators, there are two sections dedicated to these elements, periodic reporting, final reporting, which are sections 213 and 214. So that was the brief overview of continuous reporting, of periodic reporting, the scientific part. And now we open the floor to any questions that you might have via the chat function. So the floor is yours. While you're typing, I can already say as well what we mentioned in the introduction. Already in the email that we sent you beforehand, is that if there are not that many questions, that's not a problem, in a sense that we will just continue with the program. It's already a fairly long program of slightly over 3 hours, so if there are no questions, could be that there are more questions in some of the next parts as well. So right now, I don't see any questions coming in. There are a couple of things. Okay, so there's a question that we receive here, how to complete exactly the continuous reporting in the participant portal, for example, social media, the number of posts, number of channels, the website is the number of websites or the main updates. The main answer to that question is, first of all, check the Horizon 2020 online manual. Again, because for every specific tab of Sigma, there you will find specific information of what exactly is requested. Only if you have checked that part, and if you say, well, I still don't fully understand, double check with your coordinator. If it's unclear to your coordinator, then come to us as BBI-JU, and then we will include that type of information also in our FAC4 coordinators. There's a question that comes in that says the European Union apparently really likes to see analytics in the periodic reports Part B. Analytics, yes and no. Why? Because a lot of the analytics can already be drawn from the Part A. If you complete all the different Sigma tabs, like publications, like patents, like other types of dissemination and communication activities, there's already a lot of data that can be found via these tabs. So please complete this information. We are, our commission is also continuously developing different data mining tools to double check and to gather also information from the more narrative parts from Part B. But first part, please double check indeed that your part A, that all the Sigma tabs are well updated. There's a question here, Sigma dissemination exploitation, what should be included in the funding amount? If I remember correctly, in dissemination exploitation, there is a question how much money was spent on dissemination and exploitation. That's a specific question. So the costs that you have spent on dissemination and exploitation, please add them there. Of course, they should also be in line with the other costs that you have reported linked to dissemination communication that you then report via the financial statements. The question is in part A, except public summary, is it not generated from the information the continuous reporting tabs? Yes, so that is indeed the case. So in part A, it is based on the information that you have inputted into the continuous reporting tabs. Okay. Good. So for now, I don't see any new questions coming in. It could be that if there are some additional questions that come in afterwards, we can still see. It could be that they are also more linked to some of the other parts that we will discuss later today. Because, for example, we're also going to discuss reviews and assessments, so some of the elements could be there as well. But if there are no urgent questions coming in, then I'll gladly yield the presentation chair here to our next speaker. Because as you can see in our agenda, we will now go to periodic reporting, the financial part. So I gladly yield the floor. In the meantime, we're switching seats. So.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks to Dieter for the introduction. My name is Nicolo Giacomuzzi, and I'm heading the Administration and Finance Unit here in BBI. I will guide you through this short presentation about the financial aspects of periodic reporting, and then we will go through a short question and answer session. So this is a bit of an overview of the points I will touch during the presentation. I will not go through this because we will go slide by slide. I would like to start the presentation with a small reminder about the definition of eligible cost. This definition is embedded in Article 6 of the Grant Agreement for Horizon 2020. And on the left side, you see what are the characteristics of a cost to be eligible. So incurred by your entity during the reporting period, indicated in the estimated budget, incurred in connection with the action, identifiable and verifiable, must comply with the national law, and must be reasonable, of course. On the right side, in red, so you will maybe remember it, are actually the recurrent mistakes that are highlighted not just by BBI, but also by our financial audit service, where is run by the European Commission. You will discuss this later with our colleagues. And these are the recurrent mistakes that have been found up to now. So they are incurred maybe by another company that is affiliated to yours, but it's not exactly the same legal entity. After the end or before the start of the reporting period, not indicated in the budget, not in relation with the action, not verifiable, meaning recorded in the accounting or documented, properly documented by your own company, or does not comply with national law, or it's excessive. We will go through all of these aspects during the presentation. I will come back. I added some questions in the slides, and I will answer directly, probably anticipating some of your questions. So these are very schematically the cost categories that you encounter in a BBI project. Most of them are actual costs, so they are costs actually incurred by the beneficiary. They are identifiable, verifiable, and recorded in the accounts. Then you might have actually unit cost in the case of the SME owner not perceiving a salary, which is a very specific case for BBI project. And you have flat rate costs, the third category, which is related only to the indirect cost. If you remember well, you receive indirect cost as a share of the other cost, the direct cost, mainly personnel. there is 25% for all grants. Let's go then through the personal costs, which are the main part of the cost declared by beneficiary in most cases, not all of them, of course. The standard case is a person that is hired by the beneficiary via an employment contract, qualified as such under the national law. So it is really the employee of the company working on the project. We might have other type of personal costs, like the employees of a third party seconded to the beneficiary, natural person hired directly via a contract other than an employment contract, and you see what are the conditions for these specific types. Not all the personal costs are claimed under the personal cost category. There are other personal costs that might be claimed under other goods and services, meaning other direct costs. And in this case, we specify the contracts with interim companies for working on the project, natural person working autonomously, meaning consultants, natural persons paid for deliverables and not on the basis of working time. So this just is a general overview on the personal costs. Other costs that are staff related and question we receive sometimes is teleworking and eligible cost as personal cost. Of course it is. In-kind benefits, yes, if they are under the normal accounting practice of the beneficiary. Recruitment costs, normally they are not included in the personal cost because they are part of the indirect cost. Remuneration of students, yes, if they work on the project, because sometimes students are just studying on a specific project but not working on it. Parental leave, yes, of course. Cost of public officially, yes. Supplementary contract, yes, if it is a usual practice and it is authorized by the law. All these typology, all this situation must always respect the conditions of Article 6 of the grant agreement that we saw at the beginning. Among the questions that may arise from your side, we would like to tackle a recurrent mistake that we have in claims related to staff and personal cost, is that actually the costs are not actual, but they are claimed as they are included in the provisional budget in the grant agreement, or they are just an estimation. Personal costs must be actual, they must be based on actual figure, your payroll in the most typical case, or your accounting methods in case you have different type of accounting methods for personal cost. But so don't claim budgeted cost and don't claim estimation. Be really detailed and accurate in your claims about personal costs. One tricky item in the calculation of personal cost is, of course, the calculation of the hours worked on the project. Of course, they have to be multiplied by the so-called hourly rate, which is the salary per hour, plus the additional remuneration. This is the formula that you see on top of the slide, and it's the typical formula to calculate the personal cost. How is the hourly rate calculated? It is, again, a formula is the actual cost, so the annual personal cost of a staff member divided by the annual productive hours. They can be also unit cost when the accounting of our company or our beneficiary is overage personal cost. And this should be already included at the beginning into the grant agreement at the level of the grant agreement preparation. They could also be unit cost, as we saw at the beginning, in the case of the SME owners not receiving a salary. Among the frequent questions we receive is the most typical, should I keep timesheets? This is a typical question, and the answer is, it would be better. Timesheets are the more accurate way of keeping track of the working time of a staff member and the hours worked by the staff member himself or herself on the project. So the advice is, yes, keep timesheets. You might have already embedded in your internal system some alternative ways of keeping the working time of your staff members. This would be okay as well. but you have to be able, in case of financial audit, to show this system and to prove the working hours on the project to the financial auditors. Another tricky item is the hourly rate, how it is calculated. For example, if we take a reporting closing today, what hourly rate should I use, the one of 2017 or the one of 2018? The best practice is to use the hourly rate of the last closed financial year, meaning, in this case, as of today, 2017 still. For what concerns the calculation of personal cost, the other item that needs to be carefully assessed is the number of annual productive hours. There are three possibilities that can be used by you. The first one is in case you, in the employment contract, there is no specification about the working time conditions. There is a standard number of working hours, annual productive hours, that is set into the annotated model grant agreement. There is 1,720. In case annual productive hours are and working time conditions are included in the employment contract, the annual productive hours can be calculated via a normal formula, meaning annual workable hours plus overtime minus absences. A third possibility is to use the standard annual productive hours according to the beneficiary usual accounting practices. Moving to a different cost category is the one of the other direct costs. In this category, there are different typology of costs that can be declared. Travel cost and subsistence allowance for missions, for example, related to the project, equipment cost, consumables, dissemination, as it was just explained by Dieter, the cost of the certificate of financial statement in case it is required for the final report, translation cost, intellectual property right cost, and other. So I put also here a couple of questions that we sometimes receive. The first one is related to the depreciation method to declare equipment cost. You should use your own depreciation method that is in relation with your accounting practices. For what concerns the other question, to what extent should I justify this cost? As you know, you are required to justify this category of cost when these costs are more than 15% of the personnel cost. So our suggestion would be to justify when you are above this threshold, the main items, the main financial items, so the most expensive. Among the other direct costs, these are other typologies. One is a novelty under Horizon 2020, so the VAT. In case it is not deductible at national level, the VAT is an eligible cost. In case it is deductible, it is not, as for the previous framework program. Bank fees, kick-off meeting, travel costs are eligible, but the meeting has to take place during the project, meaning after the start date. And lease costs are also eligible under other direct costs. One recurrent mistake that was found by the financial auditor is actually that sometimes there is not enough documentation for the purchase of goods and services. So when you acquire, for using them in a project, goods and services, please keep the contract, keep the invoices. These documents are fundamental to prove to the auditors that these costs have been incurred during the project, they are related to the action and actually eligible for funding. These are very shortly the exchange rate provision. So you might have accounts in a currency that is different than euro. In that case, you should use the average daily exchange rate published by the official journal of the European Union that is calculated over the reporting period. And you can refer to this link to make the calculation. Subcontracting is also another critical area for what concerns the recurrent mistakes. And so I would like to really underline what are the main characteristics of subcontracting to be eligible. It must be identified in the description of the action as an action task. If it is not in the description of the action, it has to be discussed with BBI, namely with your project officer, to see if it is actually necessary to carry out the project. It must be based on business condition. It must respect the principle of best value for money. Even if no specific procedure is mentioned in the grant agreement, we would like to underline that it's very important that you follow your own condition to chase the best value for money. If the practice of your company is to get 3 offers and choose the best one in terms of cost efficiency, you have to go with your normal procedure. You have to keep the documentation related to the subcontracting and to the subcontracting procedure that you have followed to prove the best value for money principle. The performer of the subcontracting has no supervision from the beneficiary, and while the subcontractor has no rights vis-à-vis BBI, it can be audited. Among the questions that arise from recurrent mistakes, we had cases and questions in which a beneficiary was asking, can I subcontract to my cousin? No, it would be better not to do that, because apart from the best value for money, you should also avoid any conflict of interest, because of course, if you subcontract, you would pay a market price to obtain a service or a good, and this would involve profit. So pay a lot of attention to the non-conflict of interest principle that must be respected in subcontracting. Keep the documentation of the offers, the way you choose the best value for money, and keep track of any exception you might have encountered and justify them. How do I demonstrate the best value for money? Of course, as I said, the clearest example is to have 3 offers for the same type of good or service. Third parties. Third parties are also required to send us reporting documentation as for a normal beneficiary. So the reporting obligations are exactly the same. They should fill in a financial statement. I have this table. I will not go through it, but this table explains you what are the type of work, the procedure and service provided, what is eligible in terms of cost or price, and give you an overall indication also where to find the appropriate provision in the grant agreement. Shortly about the Participant Guarantee Fund, which is an instrument that is providing coverage in case of financial difficulties of one or more beneficiaries. It intervenes in case a beneficiary does not reimburse any requested amount either to the coordinator or to BBI-JU, and if the consortium accepts to continue the project at the same condition without the involved beneficiary. An equivalent amount will be transferred to the coordinator to allow the continuation of the project at the same condition as said before. So, what should you do to prevent problems that may arise during a project? The suggestion is to keep track of every transfer of pre-financing that is done from the coordinator to the beneficiaries. This will help in case a financial instability occurs to one beneficiary to keep track of the cash flow between the coordinator and the beneficiary itself, and to see what is the amount you are entitled to receive from the guarantee fund to continue the action at the same condition. What should you do when a problem occurs is first immediately contact BBI project officer and notify the issue that there is a default, so-called default beneficiary, and then we will guide you through the procedure to normally have an amendment to exclude this beneficiary and then the intervention of the guarantee fund. About the certificates and ex post audit, I will touch this very briefly. The certificate on financial statement is required only for final payments and when the EU contribution of a beneficiary is above 325,000 euros. For what concerns the certificate on methodology, is optional, is not mandatory, and is only for accounting companies that use overage personnel cost. Here, a brief list of those that are considered ineligible costs. I mentioned some of them during the presentation. And now some tips for you that I already mentioned during the presentation itself. So do not claim estimated or budgeted cost, be accurate, claim depreciation of equipment, not full cost, and in relation to the reporting period, use your current accounting practices, use your usual recording system for working hours devoted to the project, with an eye especially to timesheets, chase the best value for money for what concerns subcontracting, justify any exception, and always contact your project officer to have more clarification in case of doubt. Here is where you can find more information on the participant portal and on the FAQ for coordinators of BBI-JU. So please, now the floor is yours. If you have any question, I will try to briefly answer.
Thank you, Nicolo. And while you're typing, and there's a couple of things that are coming in, just a reminder as well, for very project-specific questions, please via your coordinator, contact the project officer. And secondly as well, Nicolo already mentioned it a couple of times, the grant agreement. So we have a lot of links in the Horizon 2020 online manual, but also in the frequently asked questions list for coordinators, to a document called the Annotated Model Grant Agreement. So this is a very useful document. It follows the same structure as the grant agreement that you have, but it also provides examples and additional information about the terminology that is being used. So a very useful document to take into account, to have a read through. Chances are that a lot of your questions will also be answered there. So in the meantime, Nicolo is reading through some of the questions that are being answered, taking some notes, so I'll gladly yield the floor back to him.
One second, I'm going through maybe 2 or 3 questions first. Okay, so I saw a question about should we keep boarding passes for travel costs? I would say no, normally no, in the sense that if the ticket has been booked and the staff member has participated to a meeting, is more than enough to prove that actually the travel took place. For what concerns the bank fees, I have it in one slide I passed very quickly, but normally bank fees that, for example, are imposed by a bank for receiving a pre-financing or another payment from BBI-JU, they are not eligible for reimbursement, while the bank fees that the coordinator incurs for transferring the payment amount to the other beneficiary, they are actually an eligible cost. There is also another question related to the personnel cost after the end of the reporting period, especially for what concerns the final period.
That is eligible.
Normally, these are eligible costs, even if they are incurred after the date, because they are related with the preparation of the final report. Let me go through the new question that appeared, just to let you know that I will not be able to answer all the questions, but I will keep track of your name and of the question, and in case these questions are particularly important, we will include them in the frequently asked questions.
I also saw that there was a question related to, okay, if let's say we are spending less money on one specific task than originally budgeted, what can we do with this money? Well, think about it. The funding that BBI-JU provides is tax money, meaning that, of course, if you are being more efficient and being able to carry out certain activities at a lower cost, that's great, but that does not give you the let's say, the go to use the money that is saved immediately into other types of activities if that is not necessary. So if, let's say, you have 10 activities in your project and one of them you can do cheaper and the rest at the same rate, great, then you will be able to submit financial statements with less costs than in total. But as long as you're able to carry out the activities, that's the main part. It's not, okay, we are entitled to X amount of funding, we should be able to claim costs to reclaim all the funding. That's not the idea. The idea is to carry out all your tasks and to mention and to clearly describe, to clearly submit realistic cost declarations.
There is one question about how to calculate equipment depreciation. I cannot answer you in a very precise way, but your own company should have a calculation method. It depends from country to country. It depends from the size of the machine. But just to make you a typical example, normally machine and equipment are depreciated within 2 years. So you have to calculate the portion of those 2 years that have been attributed to the BBI project and how many hours, in case we are talking about hours, this equipment has been used on the BBI project. But each company has this type of accounting rules, so I would suggest you go back to your financial or accounting officer that might explain exactly how this practice was for your own company. But for every company, normally there is an accounting practice for depreciation.
There's a question that comes in, how can we differentiate clearly a subcontract into a contract? Actually, there we do refer to the annotated model grant agreement, where you can actually find examples of each of these two cases. That might bring us a bit too far if we go through all these examples, but please have a look at the annotated model grant agreement there. In the meantime, we're reading a couple of the other questions that have come in.
Yes, there is an interesting question about the productive hours, because of course, as I mentioned during the presentation, you should use actually the last closed financial year in terms of calculation of hourly rate, and you are actually able in the following period to make an adjustment in case there is a relevant difference. For example, in 2018, the calculation would also hit the reporting period. You are always able to make an adjustment in the following period using a different hourly rate.
Mm-hmm. And a specific question about that or some additional guidelines have been included in the last version of the frequently asked questions list for coordinators, specifically dealing with that question, how to deal with changes compared to previously submitted and approved periodic reports. Questions keep pouring in, so I'll let Nicolo read everything.
So there is another question about the number maximum of hours beneficiary employees are allowed to claim per day, work, travel, etc. So again, go back to your normal practices, your current practices, because normally in an employment contract is indicated how much are the normal daily number of hours. It could be 8, for example, and what is the overtime hour worked. So it also should be reasonable in terms of hour declared. But again, go back to your normal practice of counting workable hours.
There's a question that if the budgeted person month rate is considerably lower than reported, I guess than what is it, estimated, may we move tasks between project partners, or is it more efficient to deliver fewer person months than promised? It's not a question about, let's say, efficiency. The main concern of all our projects is carry out the tasks that are described in your grant agreement. This is a contract between two parties, BBI, JU, and you as a consortium, where we say if you carry out these activities, then we will pay you this amount of money. So if indeed you see after a certain while that you can do specific activities with people in your organization at a lower pay scale, at the start you might have thought, okay, it was more someone on director level, and now we see that it's actually a junior who can do the work. Well, great. Then, of course, you should report the costs of the junior, and then you are being efficient. But again, only mention the actual costs that you have incurred, nothing else. Don't try to, let's say, optimization of budget is here less of an, it's not what we're aiming to do. The idea is to carry out the tasks at an appropriate cost level, ideally in line with what is mentioned in the grant agreement.
I would like to briefly mention that there are other questions, the touch points that are already addressed by the frequently asked question. So I kindly ask you to refer back to our documentation because these points are clearly explained there.
Okay. Good. Okay. Maybe time for one more question, or if there is something else coming in.
Yes. So there is a question regarding an international partner, Article 14A. Does this partner has to fill a financial statement? In case this partner receive funding, then yes.
Okay. Good. Then I would like to thank Nicolo for his presentation, for the answers. Again, we have the list of all the questions that you have answered. Also for time constraints, we weren't able to answer all your questions. But again, we'll have, that's our to-do for tomorrow, to have a read through to all the questions that you have asked us. And then we'll see if and how we can incorporate them in the next version of our frequently asked questions list for coordinators, or if there are some urgent issues, maybe to answer them indeed a bit more quickly. So, thank you again to Nicolo. We move on with the next part of the presentation, which is reviews and assessments. So reviews and assessments, why do we do this? Well, because we have received quite a lot of questions about what is the difference between these two. Sometimes they're used a bit interchangeably, which is, well, it's all about terminology, of course. So in order to explain this, let me refer to the reporting, the review, and the payment cycle. It's very similar to Horizon 2020. So what happens is that your project has been divided into different periods. So typically a period lasts 12 to 18 months. Sometimes, you know, some periods are 6 months or something, but usually they're 12 to 18 months. And during every period, the project consortium should carry out the work as it's described in the description of action in your grant agreement. And during that period, the coordinator then submits deliverables and milestones via the continuous reporting module, which we have already discussed in the first presentation of today. So at the end of a period, what happens? Then periodic reporting occurs. Then the coordinator submits the periodic report. Has then 60 days to do that after the end of the period. And then after a periodic report has been submitted, we as BBI GU then undertake an assessment of that period. Typically, we ask additional questions. It could be that we reject the report back to the coordinator, asking to add some specific elements. Could be that one or more deliverables are rejected, or we ask to submit an update for that. And once all these questions are clear, once all the declared costs have been double checked, and sometimes it could be that certain costs are rejected, then BBI GU initiates the payment. We then pay, as BBI GU, we pay to the coordinator, and then the coordinator distributes the payments between the beneficiaries. So you see that in the middle of this slide, there is this white area, and this is where reviews come into play. So reviews, it's actually where external experts are hired to review the periodic report and the deliverables of that specific period. So let's go a bit more into detail into what a review actually is. So the main purpose of a review is to provide additional information. That's the main purpose. And providing additional information to different actors in this whole process. First of all, provide additional information to BBI GU. Why? It's an additional source of information for us to better assess periodic reports, deliverables, and milestones. But it's also a very useful source of additional information for the project themselves, because this additional input, you could see it a bit as an external advisory board, because BBIGU hires external experts, people that are active in your specific field. They will have a critical yet constructive look at what you have done during a specific period, and they will give you feedback about that. And that's also the typical request that we as BBIGU ask the review experts that we hire. That is, please try to put yourself in the position of the coordinator. What type of constructive input would add value? What, if you were a coordinator, what would you like to hear besides the fact, great, everything is going okay, but you know, how can we do better? What are some pitfalls that you see not being fully immersed in this specific project? And this type of information allows us to look back and allows you to look back, namely to check the progress made during the past period, but it also allows to look forward, especially if there are still periods coming after the review. And that type of information can help you to streamline, to focus, to refocus your project. So when do reviews happen? Well, as you might have seen in the overview in the workflow, reviews are optional. So what do we mean by that is it's a common practice in Horizon 2020 project that a review is organized after the first periodic report. And BBIGU also uses this practice, and we do that for all of our projects, meaning that it doesn't mean that if your project has a review that you are, let's say, more at risk than other projects, or that you're under surveillance or anything like that because a review has been organized. No, it's a standard practice. It's just an additional source of information for BBIGU, but also for you after the first period. And by doing it after the first period, it also allows us not only to look back, but also to look forward, because there is still work that needs to be done after the first period. Additional reviews, can they be organized? Yes, but that depends on the results of past reviews, or maybe of some unexpected things that occur after the first review. They can be done maybe after we have submitted a specific deliverable, maybe in the middle of the project after a review, where you indicate, well, one of the main results that we would hoped to have, it did not happen. So yeah, we don't really know how to move forward now. Then of course, that could be a good reason for us to decide, well, you know, having an additional review in this specific case might make sense. Who are, let's say, the participants in a review? Well, first of all, that's the project representative. So typically that's the coordinator and the work package leaders. But, you know, other relevant representatives can also be invited, can also join this review meeting, because the main question to ask yourself is, who is best placed to answer questions about activities during the past period? It could be that you have a great work package leader, but he is more, or she is more, let's say, involved in the coordination, is less involved in the actual work. Then it could be a good idea to maybe not only invite the work package leader, but also maybe his or her second in command, who is more focused on the technical aspect, if such questions would be asked during a review. Other participants in a review are these external experts that we as BBIGU hire. Typically, that's 1 to 3 review experts per review. External meaning there is no link, there is no conflict of interest with the consortia, and they're also experts in their field, not necessarily scientific experts, but since BBIGU is a public-private partnership, a lot of our projects are also close to market, meaning that some specific business expertise might also be very valuable in performing the review of our projects. And then we as BBIGU are of course also involved in the reviews. Our main role there is to moderate, to facilitate, and also for those of you who have already participated in our reviews, you know, timekeeping is an essential element of what we as BBIGU do during these types of reviews. How do we prepare reviews? Well, it all starts with selecting experts, typically 4 to 6 months before a review. I say typically 4 to 6 months. It will always be a range, because there are a couple of variables if there's some holiday period in between or stuff like that. So, but order of magnitude, 4 to 6 months before a review, then we start looking for experts. How do we do that? First of all, we ask the consortia to come up with suggestions of their own. So you work in the field, you might have some great ideas about who would be very well suited to review your project. Of course, these people cannot have conflicts of interest. So we ask you to come up with a name, typically of 2 to 5 people. We also already have a look, and we try to come up with some ideas, which we then also email to the coordinator, and we ask the coordinator to check these names with the consortium. Why? Because you can reject certain experts. If you see that there's a potential commercial conflict of interest, you're fully allowed to reject experts. In any case, the final selection will be done by BBI-JU, and it's typically composed of one of the experts that you might have suggested and then one of the experts that we have found. We're always on the lookout for new interesting profiles, new interesting experts, so we're very open to any ideas that you might have. And then after the experts have been selected, then typically the consortium and BBI-JU, they discuss and they create the agenda and the presentation format. So typically that happens 2 or 3 months before the review. Then once that the periodic report has been submitted, the selected and hired reviewers, they will write what is called individual review reports. And then once they have done that, then the actual review meeting takes place. So what happens during these types of review meetings? It follows a half-day format. The first day, it's actually a half day, it's an afternoon, which is an optional day. And that's typically a meeting only between BBI-JU and the reviewers. So the idea there is to compare notes. So each of the, or let's say if there are multiple reviewers, they have submitted their individual review reports, they compare notes. They actually prepare the next day's meeting. They prepare questions, because the actual meeting where you as a consortium will also be there with your representatives is the so-called day 2. And there we have everyone together. So project representatives, reviewers, and BBI-JU, and they each play their role. So project representatives typically give presentations. The reviewers ask questions. Then there's also some Q&A. And BBI-JU's role then is to moderate these types of discussions. And then, again, an optional half a day after, again, only with BBI-JU and the reviewers, where then they gather all the input that they have received during day 2, and they start drafting the consolidated review reports. Now, for you as a consortium, what's only relevant for you is this day 2, but I just want to give you a full overview of how we typically organize things. Day 1 and day 3 are mostly dependent on the availability of the review experts. But it helps, especially since during day 3 they start preparing the draft consolidated review report, and that is also the document that you as a consortium will receive. So that's a consolidated version, so the inputs of both or all 3 experts are included in that document. It's sent to you, and you then have 30 days to provide feedback to BBI-JU about this, the findings in this consolidated review report. And as we said, this document is a very valuable input for BBI-JU in performing its periodic assessments. After this consolidated review report has been sent to you, you have given feedback. Typically, there are some follow-up questions. We as BBI-JU will then ask them to you. It could also be that similarly to an assessment, we also ask you to rework some deliverables and or also the periodic report, depending on the outcome of a review. And then we follow the rest of the workflow, we finalize our assessment, and then we initiate the next periodic payments. So that's, let's say, how the review fits into this whole structure. Where can you find more information? Well, you might have spotted the mantra that we're trying to use in this webinar today, the Horizon 2020 online manual. You will find a lot of information there as well. This is under the heading Checks, Audits, and Reviews. Again, textual information, and again, some different screenshots, which you can access via the how-to buttons, but also in section 3 of the BBI-JU Fact 4 coordinators, you will be able to find a lot more information there, specifically dedicated to reviews. So that was the short overview of what reviews are and how they fit into the whole assessment, payment, periodic reporting cycle. We now open the floor to you for any type of questions that you might have, specifically dedicated to reviews and assessments. We've also noticed that there is a bit of a lag between the moment that we ask the question and the moment that all the questions stream in. So we'll give it some time. Okay. Okay, going once, going twice. So the question is, will the project officer indicate who has to attend, all the partners or only the work package leader, on time? Well, this is why we try to start with this exercise 4 to 6 months before the review meeting actually takes place, because that also allows you as a consortium to make the necessary arrangements, to inform your consortium, to inform them, okay, this is the type of information that we'll need, and then it's up to you to decide. What we sometimes see, it's an option, it's definitely not mandatory, but we sometimes see that consortia see the review meeting as a good opportunity to have an additional meeting with some main, face-to-face meeting with the main project work package leaders or responsibles, maybe the day before or the day after the review meeting, because you have everyone in the same place then. So, you know, if you're then in Brussels, maybe in your hotel, you can also find a meeting room to discuss a couple of things there. That's one option, so we'll really leave it up to you. Of course, you can already schedule ahead. Why? Because in your grant agreement, it is already mentioned when approximately the review meeting will take place. So you can already anticipate there as well. See that there's a question, is day 2, so the actual day, is it a full 8-hour day or how long does the meeting take? Depends a bit. It mainly depends, I would say, on the amount of work packages that you have and how many of these work packages have already started in the period in question. Because of course, typically we ask presentations per work package. Sometimes it makes sense to group specific work packages together to have one common presentation. But in general, I would say that a project with 6 work packages, the review meetings are a bit shorter than projects with 10 work packages. Or sometimes, you know, even if you have a project with 10 work packages, sometimes you have a couple of work packages that have not yet started. That also makes sense to, well, you know, that might be a bit shorter then. Is it a full 8-hour day? Order of magnitude, I would say somewhere between 9 and 4:30, including a lunch break. That is mostly, let's say, the time. But again, the agenda is discussed together with the coordinator, so beforehand you will always have an idea. Also, let's say for traveling, scheduling, etc. That's also very relevant. Question that we also see here is, who pays the cost for traveling to the review meetings? That is based on the budget that you have for the project. This is also why at the start of the project, even during GAP, the grant agreement preparation, we've informed you that there will be a review meeting, when approximately the review meeting would take place. So again, that's a, yeah, you can include that in your budget, and this is also why, also for budget reasons, this is the example that I just gave. Some projects use the opportunity of having everyone in the same place to also add a specific project-related meeting to that one. So, okay. Okay, I'm waiting if there are any other questions that are coming in. There is a very project-specific question that just came in. Usually, the the review takes place until further notice after the first period, unless there are good reasons to maybe do it a bit earlier. If there are some urgent issues that happen in the first couple of months of a project, it could be that a review is organized sooner, but in principle, that is, let's say, after the first period. But there, for these type of very project-specific questions, please discuss that with your project officer via your coordinator. Okay, good. Then I would suggest that we move on to the next presentation, which is regarding BBIGU specific. So we now move into the BBIGU specific parts, meaning that the first couple of presentations that we've had were related to the more reporting elements that are relevant and that are very similar to Horizon 2020 reporting. Now we will move to the more BBIGU specific parts. There are a couple of sections there. So we'll start first with in-kind and cash additional investments. Then also we'll have a presentation about the KPI reporting. So these are the very BBIGU specific ones. And for the next speaker, I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Marta Campos. I am the legal manager here in BBI, and I have the pleasure to have to present one of these specificities of BBI that I know is not the most popular one, but nonetheless is a specificity of a public-private partnership that, beyond implementing Horizon 2020, we also have as an objective to leverage the investment. So, one of the objectives of the partnership is to leverage investments, and that is done through the in-kind and additional investments. So let's start a little bit with the definitions that I know that everybody has read somewhere or another, but I understand that there are not something as business as usual with other Horizon 2020 projects. It can be sometimes difficult to understand. So first, you might have heard already a lot of talking about ICOP. ICOP is in-kind contribution towards operational costs, meaning these are the costs incurred in the implementation of the action, but not covered by the BBIGU grant, the BBIGU contribution, or any other union contribution. So, on theory, if you are implementing a demo project, if you are in an innovation action, at least if you are a private beneficiary, 30% of the costs that you have that are not covered by the grant agreement, at least that is your ICOP. It can be more, but if you are a private partner in a demo or in a flagship, at least that 30% will be your ICOP. Then we have another concept that is actually, according to the legal basis, should be called financial contributions, but for historic reasons, everybody refers to it as incas. So, incas refers to any financial transfer, money, made from one beneficiary to another beneficiary within the project to cover the cost of implementing part of the description of the action. This financial transfer is not part of the project budget. So to try to explain in a more vulgarized vocabulary, could be the case that within a project, a beneficiary is going to pay on top of what is reflected in the project budget to another beneficiary to implement part of the action. So it's an extra funding that is not coming from BBI, it's not coming from any other union budget, but it's coming from another beneficiary, large industry that was interested to participate in the same project with a certain research institution. As the budget was not enough, they decided that that participation was going to be facilitated by this donation. Then we go to another term that, if you have read the guide for applicants, or if you have read an our plans, you will find that it's defined as additional investment. Plenty of people, to short this and to vulgarize, they call it additional activities, ICA. So these are cost investments incurred by beneficiaries, industry partners, implementing activities, investments outside the work plan, but contributing to the objectives of the BBI initiative. So these additional investments are not part of the project. They are not needed to directly implement the project. Nonetheless, it happens that when you need to build a flagship, you need to build a demo plant, there are plenty of other site investments that need to be done to achieve that objective. So that, in that case, would be additional investment. Additional investments are reflected in the proposal, but later on they are tackled by the private member association, the Bio-Based Industries Consortium, BIC. So In that sense, it's less complicated in the reporting. So, in what concerns the evaluation and certification of ICOP, that is what the majority of the proposals have. This valuation and certification of ICOP can be based in two models. Either you follow as it is the eligible cost, you follow the project budget, or you want to report total cost. What we are asking regarding the reporting and certification, and we are going to enter into more detail now, is we ask for an annual estimation that is done through a questionnaire that has been sent already with a deadline of 14 December, if I am not mistaken. And we will ask for a certification at the end of the project. So that certification, we will enter in more details later, but if you are based that on eligible costs and you have to present a certificate of financial statement, it will be done everything at the same goal. If you, because you have decided to base that in the total cost, according to what is in your account, not basing that on the eligible cost of the project, and you want to certify it, you will need to certify it, but a certificate should be produced by an independent external auditor based on the international standards, etc., etc. So let's go into more detail to what we ask from you. So to try to make your life simple, maybe you have not understand everything that we have tried to compile in the definitions in the previous slide, but here what we are entering is, okay, what are we going to ask from you? As I have stated, for ICOP, what we are going to ask from you is an annual reporting that it has been sent already. This annual reporting, this year, we have even tried to simplify it, because the idea is that in the future, this can also be done through the general module of Horizon 2020. So the general reporting module, you will have the option there. Right now, any future development of the IT tools are slow. There are limitations in terms of resources. So we have tried to facilitate everybody, the life of everybody, and we have sent you an exercise for each coordinator to complete. In that exercise, we have the project call ID, the project number, then by beneficiary, and what we are asking. We are asking an estimation per beneficiary of the ICOP incurred in the last year. And also we are asking, if applicable, and we understand that this is not the situation for the majority of the projects, we are asking if there has been any financial transfer from one beneficiary to another. So if there has been financial contributions in cash. It can be happen that in the majority of the projects, this is not applicable. So simply report not applicable. I have stated for additional activities, ICA, life is even simpler for what is regards the interactions with us, because this is done through BIC, so the private partner association. So they are the ones that compile all the information, and they are the ones that are in charge of the reporting. So, at the end of the project, we will need to certify ICOP. So, it could happen that in the majority of the cases, you want to do this for simplicity reasons to base this in eligible cost. In that case, you will need to present the same certificate of financial statement that you have presented. So it's only one, there is not an extra one, it's the same certificate of financial statement that will serve for the two purposes: to certify the eligible cost and to certify that there was a part that it was not reimbursed by BBI, that is your ICOP. So we expect that there are a majority of the cases that will choose this method. Nonetheless, for beneficiaries not receiving funding, for large companies that they have incurred in more costs of what is reflected in the project budget, because as you know, the project budget is based in categories that have been established for Horizon 2020. That is not the real cost of a project. If that beneficiary is interested in certifying the total cost, They can do it. They have to do it with a certificate issued by an independent external auditor in conformity with the international standards. So here we are trying to summarize what are the cases. So if a beneficiary has requested to BBI less than 300,025, that is the limit for the certificate of financial statement. It's something that everybody can remember quite easily. So you have requested less than 325K. You don't have to present a certificate of financial statement. You don't have to present no certificate by the independent auditor to certify it on total ICOP, unless, and here is the second column, and here is important for beneficiaries not receiving funding. If your contribution is less than 325K, but your ICOP, your income contribution towards the project, is more than that is a limit, 325, yes, we are asking to certify the ICOP because that is one of the requirements that is stated in the Council regulation. So, and the rest, it will follow under, I think that the other two columns on the right, they follow the logic of Horizon 2020. If you have a contribution from the BBI undertaking of more than 325K, you have to present a certificate of financial statement. It's up to you. If you present the certificate of financial statement, it's done. You have certified everything, eligible cost or an ICOP. But of course, if you want to certify the total cost, you can present a certificate of financial statement, and also you could present this. I am stating this is more relevant for beneficiaries not receiving funding, large industries that they are going to have high amounts of ICOP. So I don't expect this in RIAs to happen, but nonetheless, here are the possibilities. Yes, you could, if you want, to present a certificate by an independent auditor to certify your total income contribution, your total ICOP. Okay, so don't worry about this table. It is in a document. It's going to be published in our website. It was going to be published by today. There's some connect delay, so it will be published in this week. So, as I stated, all this information is going to be published in the website. I think that it's going to be in the project management section, and you there will find again all the definitions, all the guidelines, and of course the table that tries to summarize the situation, because now we are finding projects that we soon finalize, and these questions are arising more and more. As you have apologized in advance, I apologize now. I know that it's not the most easier subject, so I don't expect to be able to answer all the questions this afternoon where I was available. I will try to answer now if you have specific questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Marta. And that's also one of the reasons why we actually have this type of reporting webinar. It is because we realize that certain elements are not always easy. So now is your time. I saw that there are some questions that have come in. So I'll let Marta quickly read through a couple of them, and then I'll let her answer.
So we have a question regarding, the question actually is, are financial contributions, INCAs, a simple transfer of funding between a beneficiary to another, and that is not need an amendment? And here is when we enter to start in the confusion. I think that here we have it's a certain confusion between budget transfers between beneficiaries that happen a lot in a project, and what is a financial contribution. Financial contribution is not a transfer of money between categories of a project budget or between beneficiaries. It's, as I said, it's outside the project budget. So it's a money that it was not actually registered in the project budget. It was not reflected there. It's a beneficiary that wants to top up the fund that another beneficiary is receiving, so they can implement and certain tasks of the action. So there is nothing to do with budget transfers between beneficiaries. So if it is within the budget, it's not a financial contribution. That I think that we can establish the analogy.
Well, Marta, just if I can try to give an example, which will be, suppose that you have a project that has total eligible costs of 1 million euros, to make it easy. And it's a project that it's an innovation action. So the standard funding percentage for an innovation action is 70%. So suppose that all the partners, let's say, you have nonprofit, etc., but suppose that all the partners are entitled to 70% funding. That means that of the 1 million eligible costs, they could request 700,000 euros worth of funding. But in order to increase their chances of actually getting the funding, because that's included in the evaluation, they request, instead of 700,000 euros worth of funding, they only request 600,000 euros worth of funding. That means that their in-kind contribution is increased. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Then, outside of this, because the calculations that we just made are based on the budget, but outside of this 1 million, you have one beneficiary that says, well, I will also give 50,000 euros to another beneficiary of the consortium to carry out certain activities. And of course, these types of activities should then be described in the grant agreement. This 50,000 euros, this is an in-cash contribution.
Correct.
And the way that it is described here means that it's not funding, because that was also part of the question. Are financial contributions in cash a simple transfer of funding? No, because funding is based on eligible costs and the funding percentage and what you request. In cash contributions, financial contributions are on top of the budget.
And that is why in the proposal, so you will find since the last call, so we have introduced in the template for proposals a different sections to really reflect these financial contributions, to be very clear that is outside the project budget. I have another question, an interesting one actually. The question is, has an international partner, so a beneficiary maybe from the States, from the American States, to certify the ICOP at the end of the project? It's an interesting question, and I will say no. Because here, to be honest, so the objective of the initiative is to leverage private investment within Europe. So this ICOP from an international partner is welcome. We will report on it. We will follow it, but it's not part of the private partners that the Council regulation has in mind when it sets the objective to leverage private funding. So here I have a question. So
yeah, we're trying to read the questions here, but not always 100% sure what the questions are. So maybe we'll first go to a couple that we're sure. The question is here just to make sure certification is only at the end of the project.
Yes, certification is at the end of the project. What has happened, and I don't know if any of you were inside within this project, is that last year the industry partners, went through a series of projects and they started already to certify ICOP. But there's nothing to do with the usual business. It was an initiative that it was done by BIC, with certain projects that are very big projects where there is a large amount of ICOP, and because it's also in the best interest of BIC to start certifying the ICOP of that project as soon as possible. Okay, but that is something that BIC has done in their initiative, and if you are not part of that project, you are not concerned. That is why I am stating that, yes, certification is only at the end of the project.
So we receive a question here. Is it correct then that a large enterprise not receiving BBI funding and they have 250,000 euros worth of ECOP, they do not need a CFS?
They don't need a CFS. It will happen that depends if they are big members. It could be also in the best interest of BIC, of the industry association, to nonetheless certify it. Okay, one thing is what we're not going to ask. I'm not going to hide the fact that we welcomed all the certification of all ICOP. Nonetheless, that will be if that beneficiary is a member of BIC, it will need to be tackled with BIC if there is any initiative to facilitate that certification. We will not ask for it.
We're just reading through a couple of the questions.
So there is a question: if a certificate of financial statement is needed from a European partner who does not receive any grant to justify their ICOP, and the answer is yes. Please refer to the table that is found right now in your screens, and I repeat, this table is part of the document, more complete guidelines that are going to be also uploaded. So it actually, if the ICOP is more than the 325 key, yes, they can. We will request certification either through a certificate of financial statement, either through a certificate by independent auditor. Whatever is easier for the beneficiary is up to them.
So here also a question that says, for ICOP, if I have 1 million that I spent, is it 70% funded? Do I declare the 300,000 of ICOP, or do I take into account 25% indirect costs? So indirect costs is an integral part of your total costs. So you take the personnel cost, the other direct costs. Based on these two elements, typically the indirect costs, 25% are calculated. Then on top of that, you also add the subcontracting cost, and that is your total cost based on which the funding percentage is calculated. So when you're asking, do I need which is the cost of this ICOP? ICOP, simply put, is the difference between your total costs, eligible costs that you declare, and the funding that you request. That's the difference. So, and in that, yes, the indirect costs are already, the 25% already included in one way of the calculation.
I don't, we have time? Okay, because I am going to go, there is another question. What is the difference between a certificate of financial statements and a certificate from an independent auditor? So the certificate of financial statement is actually a model that has been established for Horizon 2020, and you will find it in the guidelines for Horizon 2020. A certificate for an independent auditor has to follow the independent international standards that are applicable to the whole European Union. In the guidance that are going to be uploaded in the webpage, we provide examples of these independent certificates by auditors. But of course, if the normative change, if the ISO 3000 change, it will be up to the independent auditors to provide the appropriate certificate.
Okay. So there are no new questions coming in. Again, we will read through all the questions that we've received. If we see that indeed we've missed a couple, apologies already, but we will try to include them later on via the Fact4 coordinators or separately in a separate email. But I would like to thank Marta for her contribution to the first part of the BBI-JU specific reporting. And then I would gladly give the floor to our next speaker, who will introduce us in the reporting linked to BBI-JU KPIs or key performance indicators.
Thank you, Dieter. Good afternoon to everyone. This is Pilar Llorente, Project Officer from BBI. And as Dieter just said, I will speak to you today about the BBI-specific KPIs. This will be a brief overview on the process of monitoring and analysis of the KPIs. And most specifically, we would like to focus on a very practical matter, on how to complete the KPI questionnaire that you've all received some weeks ago. But before that, let us recall together the 8 KPIs defined in the CIRA. In the CIRA 2017, you can find these 8 KPIs. You see, in your screen. I will just very quickly go through them. KPI number 1 is about new bio-based cross interconnections. KPI number 2 is about new bio-based value chains. Number 3 is about the number of grant agreements, BBI grant agreements signed. Number 4 is new bio-based building blocks. Number 5, new bio-based materials. Number 6, new bio-based consumer products. Number 7, number of BBI EU flagships. And number 8, number of validated technologies within with a TRL gain. As you see here in green, those are the KPIs that we need to gather the information from projects. KPIs are defined at a project level, at a program level, but to get to this aggregated overall contribution at the program level, we need to go to you to gather the information from your project. And this information is gathered through the KPI and impact questionnaire. Let's go very quickly to an overview on the process. This questionnaire is sent out to you, project coordinators, yearly. This time it was sent in October, requesting feedback from you for until end of October. And we ask you to report on your expected contribution by 2020 or by the end of the project, whatever comes first. These individual contributions are analyzed, gathered, and aggregated at a program level. What do we do with these contributions? We analyze them and we report about them in our annual activity reports. So I encourage you to have a look at our annual activity report 2017, so you can see actually how your contributions help us making sense out of the progress of the BBI program. So far we have received 70 answers from you, for which we are very thankful. But we would like to request to those that didn't yet send the completed questionnaire, please do it ASAP. It's very essential for us to receive this information. Your questions are always welcomed either today, live, or at any time at info.bbi Europa EU. So let's go to the practical matters. The questionnaire you have received is divided into 3 sections. Section number 1, the general one, provides all the definitions of KPIs and newness. I did say before, all the KPIs are defined in the CIRA, and these are the definitions provided in the CIRA are the very same ones that we use for our questionnaire. There, we also ask you to provide with a very brief summary of the contributions to the KPIs that you will develop in the following sheets, spreadsheets for each dedicated KPI. And we ask you as well, this is a novelty of this year, about your contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, because we are glad to observe that most of our projects contribute to most part of them. Second part is about the KPIs. The 6 KPIs we need to gather information from you. Most important here is that you keep in mind, please, to report always on both quantitative information, so number of new interconnections, value chains, materials, products, but also qualitative information, so clear explanations on the nature of novelty, the aspects of newness that these new value chains, products, etc. are providing. Third part is also essential. It's where we gather your contributions to the socioeconomic, environmental, and other impacts such as health, safety, regulations, policy making, and so on. So let's go into a bit more detail with some examples of how to fill in the KPI questionnaire. As just said before, you will receive the whole Excel spreadsheet with different KPIs. Please choose the KPIs that are relevant for you and take your time to complete them. So it is important that you, as just said, indicate the number of new interconnections, value chains, etc., and clearly explain the interconnection of the material and detail why it is new. So, to see it more clearly, let's pick up an example for KPI number 1. You see there the first entrance of the sheet, please indicate the number of cross-sector interconnections and include a brief description of each of them. So if you have more than 2, more than 3, you can add as many columns as needed. So when you have done this, indicating the number and a brief explanation, you go a bit down the Excel sheet and you will find that you can click for each cross-sector interconnection which sectors are involved. Sectors in 3 segments. In the primary sector and the biomass origin, so you can choose agriculture, forestry, aquatic, so on. In the processing side and also at the end users. For example, we have here a new interconnection taken for one of our projects between forestry and feed, where wood and cellulosic material is used as a substrate to produce protein-rich feed ingredients that are intended to be used in aquaculture, so in feed for fish. In this case, we would have a new interconnection between the forestry sector and the food and feed additives, and you can see the 2 crosses there. So you will need to briefly explain this interconnection and click on those sectors. Okay, we keep the same interconnection for the 3rd step. So for this new interconnection, please indicate in which way it is new. It can be new because of the feedstock, because of the technologies, because of the new markets, because of new business models, so several reasons. In this case, we have chosen 2. It is new because they are using a new biomass source, and also because they are developing a new market for fish feed. So there you go, you click the 2 options and you explain exactly this, the reasons of novelty. Let's have a look now at KPIs 4 and 5. We have grouped them because they follow the same format in the Excel sheet. Let's recall KPIs 4 and 5 refer to new bio-based building blocks and to new bio-based materials respectively. So again, it's the same process. Please write the number of new bio-based building blocks and then use one column for each new building block or for each new material. For each of them, you need to indicate first what is the nature of novelty, and you have 3 options. Is it really a breakthrough material that has or building block that has no fossil-based counterpart? Is something radically new? Or is it something that a building block that is identical to a non-renewable material, but that has not been yet that is not yet available at commercial scale? Or is it a building block that has a better performance than any fossil-based counterparts in comparable applications? So please choose one of these three categories. And then again, going down in the Excel sheet, choose which are the aspects of novelties. Is it because of the feedstock? Are you using new feedstock? Or is it because enhanced environmental performance, better functionalities, better economic performance? Please click on the element address and explain why. In this example, we clicked on, for example, CO2 reduction and emission reduction. Let's have a look at KPI 6 now. It's about new bio-based consumer products. And then again, I won't repeat the same dynamic. Please fill in the number. Use one column for each of the products to give a brief description. And the important clarification here is KPI 6 is defined for innovation actions because it targets products that reach TRL 6 and 7. However, we know that research and innovation actions also contribute to the future creation of consumer products. So please, you can also report on those contributions from RIA projects, and we will consider them as well. Let's move now to the Excel sheet, the sheet on the expected impacts. This gathers a diverse range of impacts that go from socioeconomic impact, including impact on markets and industry, new skill jobs, growth of incomes, educational society, regional and local impact. There's a section as well for environmental impact, resource efficiency, CO2 emissions, many other factors, health and safety issues, regulations, and some others. In this case, please use a cross to indicate which of these aspects, which of these impacts are addressed by your project, and ideally, please provide an explanation, and when available, it is very valuable for us to count with your quantitative estimates. We know it is very difficult to provide it at the stage where the project is still running, but if you are already carrying out some economic performance analysis, or if you have LCA ongoing and you have some numbers already, that it's fantastic for us. So, for example, in this case, we've taken from a project reporting that there are 8 direct jobs created through the project, but it is estimated that 60 other additional jobs will be created per kilogram of bioplastic produced. Let's have a look at the environmental impact. So following the same philosophy, please click on the aspects that your project contributes to. In this case, we have the example of a project that contributes both to the reduction of CO2 emissions and to a better management or avoidance of waste. In this case, ideally, you should as well explain in which way your project contributes and provide some quantitative estimates, as in the cases we are highlighting here in the slide. And last example and impact, for example, we are asking you to report if your project is contributed to develop safer processes or healthier products. We can take the examples of some projects that are, for example, producing bio-based solvents with lower toxicity than the commonly available ones, or others that avoid hazardous catalysts in their processes or achieve safer processes. So please, again, click on the box you are addressing and provide some explanations. To finish this presentation, just let me recall the most important aspects. Please, before answering, read very carefully the definitions of the KPIs. This is very important, as well as the aspect of novelties that are expected. Please complete the questionnaire 2018. Why I'm highlighting this? Because it has changed in relation to last year's. And we have received some questionnaires from 2017, and it really number of cells, content of cells has changed, and it disrupts the whole integration of Excel sheets if we receive a questionnaire that is not following the same structure of content as this year. So please make sure you send this one, 2018. Then for each new bio-based interconnection, value chain, product, chemical, include a clear explanation of why it is new. It can be about functionalities or about environmental performance, economic performance, or other. Why they are new. This is key for us. Add, please, quantitative estimates whenever available. Even if they are preliminary, please indicate these estimates. For any question you have, don't hesitate to contact us back at our functional mailbox. And please, most of you have already answers, for which we are very thankful, but those of you that have not yet done it, please do it as soon as possible, because it's essential for us to have a complete data, to have a reliable reporting on KPIs. And keep in mind that with your input, you are greatly contributing to a comprehensive understanding of how BBI EU program is evolving and to what extent it's being successful. So thank you very much, and I welcome your questions. Oh, yes. Not yet finished. Where to find more information? Exactly. You can go, as Marta previously explained as well, you can go in our website to participate project management, and there you will find the frequently asked questions for coordinators, where you have where you have a link to our explanatory document on how to complete the questionnaire, plus some other questions and answers related to the specific reporting. So thank you very much, and now I'm open for your questions.
Thank you very much, Pilar. So I'll leave you. So there's one question that is coming in already, which is, so did KPI 3, does it refer to cooperation between projects? Because now it's shown as a number of grant agreements signed, which seems a KPI for the program itself.
Exactly. These are all 8 KPIs are defined at a program level, and they are meant to help us monitor the progress and the success of the program. Of these 8 KPIs, there are 2 that are measured, let's say, directly at program level, and these are KPI 3. It's the number of, I think in the first version of the CIRA was defined as number of cooperation projects, but then with the revision of the CIRA, it was the definition was made more accurate to indicate that indeed it referred to the numbers of BBI projects, what is the same number of grant agreements signed. And indeed, this KPI is measured directly at program level, and we don't need you to report on this because it's just an available number for us. And it is the same case for KPI 7, number of BBI flagships. So these 2, KPI 3 and 7, are excluded from the KPI questionnaire because we measure them directly at program level. No, so you don't need, I see a follow-up question. You need to report on KPI 3? No, you don't need to report on KPI 3. Okay, I see a very interesting question. What is the difference between building block, material, and consumer product? How you distinguish between these? Okay, so our reference text always remains the revised CIRA, the CIRA 2017, and I invite you to either go directly to CIRA, to pages 62 or 63, or to the questionnaire, where we reproduce exactly the definition. For example, building block. Well, building block is a chemical substance that can be further processed into different fine chemicals or materials or products. Of course, I know it's a wide definitions are complex, and it's difficult to find the standardized definitions for these three elements: building blocks, materials, and products. But I would say, not to enter now in the discussion of definitions, which is very complex, I would say first refer to the definitions provided in the questionnaire, which are the very same ones as those provided in the CIRA. And if for your project you have a specific question on how to classify something as a material, as a product, or as a building block, please, first discuss this within your consortium. Try to find the answer that is more accurate for you. But if you still have questions, please come back to us, because this is something that has to be also analyzed at case by case basis.
This is one of these typical, very good examples of questions that are somewhere on the border between a project-specific question and a more general question. But indeed, we are here for you as well. This is why we have the functional mailbox info@BBI for specifically these types of questions. Are there any other questions related to KPI reporting? That looks indeed like a more project-specific question.
Yes.
So
I see a project-specific question relating one of the figures we mentioned in the questionnaire. Indeed, that's why, so questioning some numbers we were showing in the questionnaire, that's why it is so important for us that you accompany your quantitative estimates with explanations. Qualitative explanations on the number referred, and also how did you get to these numbers? Is it if it's environmental question, is it through a preliminary LCA or final LCA? Is it through economic viability analysis? So which is the methodology you're using? Yes, we request explanations on the numbers, of course.
Okay. Don't see any more questions coming in. Okay, then I'd like to thank Pilar for her contribution as well and for answering our questions. And then we will move to the next part of the presentation. So, as I said, the previous two presentations were about BBI-JU specific reporting. Now we move to something that might at first sight seem very general, but there's a good reason why we've included this presentation, is because we have received a lot of questions about this. We mention audits in a lot of presentations as well. And then sometimes we're asked, yeah, but what exactly do you mean with audit? And this is why we've also included this presentation in today's program. So gladly give the floor to our next speaker.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alberto Mattiuzzi, and I'm the Audit Liaison Officer at BBI-JU, and I'm pleased today to present to you the audit process. So in the course of this presentation, we will touch some elements of the ex-post audit process, in particular the legal basis, the objectives, the scope, and the actors involved in the process, the main audit steps and advices BBI-JU wishes to provide to you, then a recapitulation of the consequences of audit findings as they are expressed in the grant agreement, some clarification on the possible redress measures at your disposal, and finally, some references for additional information you may need. So, let's start then with the legal basis for the ex-post audit that ground on the general EU legislation for Horizon 2020 and that are further detailed in the Article 22 of your grant agreement. Please note that other control processes are mentioned under this article and will not fall in the scope of this presentation. Checks and reviews form part of ex-ante controls of expenditure, and I think before you have already received some presentation about. OLAF investigation might be triggered by the result of an ex-post audit, but have different purposes and procedures. Finally, the European Court of Auditors might review the work of your auditors, and in its current approach, this is mainly due through desk reviews of audit documentation. So let's go to the objectives of ex-post audits can be summarized in assessing the legality and regularity of project payments as a building block of assurance on BBI-JU expenditure. And in their scope, they normally concern the financial implementation of the action, as reported by you and validated by BBI-JU, together with the paid cost claims. But they can also touch technical aspects of compliance with other grant agreement obligations. And as a classical example in this regard, you can expect that auditors will check if the correct displaying of the JU, European Union, and BIC emblems are presented, and if proper information on the funding source is provided. So please pay attention also to these technical aspects. For your information, each audit mission typically covers up to 3 different participation, but in theory this can go up to 9, and they touch your Horizon 2020 project which affected the same beneficiary. This means that 1 or more EU entities implementing Horizon 2020 might be involved. If we look indeed at the actors, the Common Audit Service is the leading actor of the European Commission and is in charge of delivering a corporate approach for the audit cycle. The audits can be conducted by the Commission own official staff or be outsourced to appointed external audit firms. And for your information, these are the KPMG, PwC, and Moore Steven. This corporate approach aims to ensure equal treatment of all beneficiaries, together with consistency and legal certainty in the application of rules. You, as a beneficiary of EU funding, are required to provide to the auditors any information that allows them to verify compliance of reported costs with the provision in the grant agreement. Please note that the non-provision of this information will be regarded as a failure to substantiate costs and, consequently, as a potential breach of the grant agreement obligation referenced in the slide. You also must allow access to your sites and premises and must ensure that information requested is readily available, and the information provided must be accurate, precise, and complete, and in the format requested, thus including electronic format. The BBI-JU and the other EU entities implementing Horizon 2020 are individually responsible for the correctness of their EU budget expenditure and for the implementation of corrective measures to the audit findings. Please note that separate roles of Common Audit Service and BBI-JU. Auditors carry out an independent examination of the cost claims, activities, and accounts of beneficiaries. BBI-JU makes decision on the payment of the grants, taking in full account the results of the audits, which are deemed to be final and agreed with you. Let's see now the detailed step of the audit process. Under your direct concern, the audit starts with the letter of announcement, which is sent to the legal representative of your organization up to 2 years after the payment of the balance of one of your participation. If the CAS in this letter, the CAS informs you about the intention to carry out an audit and provides the necessary instruction for planning and preparing the audit fieldwork and for preparing the supporting documents for the auditor. In the examination phase, the auditor will then firstly perform a desk review of the documentation provided and, starting from that basis, will perform the visit in the spot, performing a certain set of audit procedures that are indicatively listed in the so-called Indicative Audit Program. The purpose of the Indicative Audit Program is to provide evidence that shall substantiate any preliminary findings by the auditor. In principle, your appointed person for relating with the auditors will have real-time discussion on these findings. And for sure, these findings have to be mentioned in the course of the fieldwork closing meeting. But please note also, as we will see, that multiple visits can occur before closing the fieldwork. And the next step, the reporting and closure phase, starts when the auditor considers that he has received enough information to draft his preliminary audit report. But this report still needs to be assessed and quality controlled before being submitted to you. Opening the so-called contradictory procedure. Indeed, you will be provided with a standard period of 30 days to validate or contest the findings and the conclusion of the auditor. In this continuous dialogue, you might need to provide additional evidence to support your arguments. And it should be mentioned to you, the auditor might still need to come back in the audit fieldwork to corroborate this additional evidence. Once the full set of comments and supporting documents is received and assessed by the auditor, he will submit a draft audit report that will be reviewed by the Common Audit Service with possible internal consultations. Please note that the BBI-JU will not be necessarily consulted at this stage. This might happen on most problematic cases where an opinion from an operational service might be still needed by the auditors. As a result of these quality controls, the CAS will issue to you a final audit report that shall include your official replies and which is accompanied by a letter of conclusion that includes information on a possible extension of audit findings that we will treat hereafter, and we will that triggers also the letter of conclusion, the launching of the implementation of the audit findings by the operational entity, in this case BBI-JU. For your information, the implementation of cost adjustments or recoveries, when they are applicable, will occur either in the following REPA, reporting and payment, or through recovery orders if the project is terminated. Or is closed. So let's see now some advices that I would like to provide for each of the steps I presented to you, bearing in mind that cooperation with the auditor is critical in all stages. So let's start with the initiation. At the initiation stage, you should check that the information instructions contained in the letter of announcement provide you a necessary information to appoint a contact person in your organization. You should timely provide information and documents requested in this letter of announcement. You should check name and references of the auditor in charge. You should consider that the grant agreement under Article 22 provides to you also the right to object on the appointment of the grounds of commercial confidentiality. Planning and preparation phase. It's important that you agree on the earliest possible dates for the audit fieldwork. This is an advice because this will lead to less timing pressure at the reporting and closure steps. So, indeed, facilitate the desk review and prepare for the audit fieldwork. Keep documents in order, provide complete information and documents as requested in the letter of announcement, ask for clarification to your auditor, and yes, start familiarizing with the indicative audit program, which can already provide you some useful information about the audit fieldwork. So then make arrangements for the appropriate persons and officer in your organization who deal with costing, recording, and accounting to be present during the fieldwork. In the examination phase, my advice is to seek for support in the indicative audit program, which provides you information on conditions to be checked by the auditor against grant agreement requirements per each type of cost, and the general procedure that has to be performed by the auditor. In case of a finding, my recommendation is that you check that all these procedures have been performed and discussed with you. Ensure that enough time is reserved to discuss so with the auditor the preliminary finding, the missing documents, and the further step that might be needed. My closure advice for this phase is that you should preserve in clarifying your doubts. You should be resilient in defending your rights and disagreements. This doesn't mean that you will be always right. It's just that the principle of all this process is that you should not be surprised with the final conclusion of the audit. There is no surprise effect. You are always entitled in multiple stages to request for clarification and be provided with an answer to your questions. This will allow you to enter into the reporting and closure phase, where my advice is to discuss first with the auditor if some information from the examination phase is not reported. Please consider that the preliminary audit report has been quality reviewed by the Common Audit Service only on the basis of the information displayed there, and in order to ensure equal treatment, consistency, and legal certainty. So, comment with agreement and disagreement on all findings and recommendations raised in the preliminary audit report, and accompany your comments by appropriate, sufficient, and persuasive evidence. The contradictory procedure shall be fully exploited to carefully review preliminary findings and the recommendation. Use it all. Check the indicative audit program. This provide every missing supporting document or request additional clarification as needed. And if really is necessary, agree for a reasonable and justified extension of the contradictory procedure. Findings and recommendations shall be based on evidence, as I said, and against the grant agreement obligations. So, if, for example, the preliminary audit report proposes adjustments on the grounds of missing documentation, possibly not discussed in the examination phase, go back to your auditor. and then start discussing with him also the systemic findings. You will see later that possible systemic findings may later on be extrapolated, so extended to other audit cost claims in other actions. Then the last step of the process goes with the implementation of these audit findings. And when you receive the letter of conclusion and final audit report, check that the adjustments to the report and the detailed explanation on changed positions, especially in case you do not entirely agree with the audit findings in preliminary audit report, you should have received feedback in this version of the report. Do not implement adjustments yourself through complementary cost statements. BBI-JU will do so by offsetting them in the next reporting period or by recovery order, as we said, and taking into account the comments you have submitted in the final report. I think it's useful to recap for you the possible consequences the audit findings might have. As indeed, these error findings might lead to recovery of ineligible costs or reduction of the grant. They can lead to recovery on due amount and extension of the audit findings. They can lead to suspension of payments and or of the project itself until the termination of the grant. Or even they can lead to a request to amend the Annex 1 of the grant agreement in case something was not available during the audit fieldwork. OLAF investigations also may be triggered in case of evidence of suspicion in fraud. So, still on the consequence of the audit findings, I wish to spend a few words on the extension of the audit findings. In case of systemic or recurrent and material where the threshold is set at 2% of your overall costs, in these cases, these findings may be extended to the non-audited projects at periods you participate, and this always until 2 years after the payment of the balance. So, in the scope of for implementation of the audit findings is listed in the letter of conclusion with proposed correction methods and corrections rates. When you receive the letter of conclusion, you will have 90 days to confirm or propose changes in the 3 categories I told you before. And if relevant, you can submit to the Common Audit Service revised financial statements. The Common Audit Service will check your reply and will coordinate the implementation of the audits with the relevant EU entities. Please note that in case of no reply from you, the implementation will proceed as proposed in the letter of conclusion and with the flat rate proposed by the Common Audit Service. It's due that I also provide you some clarification on your possible redress provisions, and the final audit report and the letter of conclusion should be considered as final. Findings and observations shall be crystallized in the report. The audit process shall have provided to you the possibility to timely provide comments and finally agree with the findings. So the letter of conclusion does not express a final position on the financial impact of the findings and cannot be brought to court. On the contrary, the implementation of the audit findings will still allow you to provide observations in the cases and processes detailed under the Chapter 6 of the grant agreement, but limited to the implementation method and to the contractual obligations, not on the validity of the findings. The process should have crystallized them. If you consider that we are acting in breach of our contractual obligation, you can bring an action under the Article 272 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union to the Court of Justice of the European Union. This closes my presentations, and before coming to possible questions you might have, I wish just to provide you with some references for additional information, which you will be able to find in the Funding and Tenders portal, which I think you already know now will soon be changed name. And in there, under the Horizon 2020 annotated grant agreement, you will find the necessary information on the contractual obligation you have to respect. On the Horizon 2020 online manual, there is a dedicated session on checks, audits, reviews, and investigation. And as I repeatedly say during the presentation, please have a look, start familiarizing since the beginning with the indicative audit program. I'm sure you will find there a lot of explanation on the work of the auditors. If in general you have questions on the audit process, the corporate approach is to address your questions to Research Enquiry Service. They will be dealing with your request in the most optimal way. So that was all for me, and I think that now we can switch to the questions.
Yes. So thank you, Alberto. And as Alberto already mentioned, in audits, they are always ahead of us, because he already mentioned the new name of the participant portal, but the information will still all be available there, no problem. So I see that there are a couple of questions that are being asked.
So the first question I see is about the timing of the audit field work and the reporting and closure. Yes, what I can give you has a fixed date is the target closure of an audit by the end of a year, and so this is a target for the Common Audit Service. Obviously, the Common Audit Service relies on a delegated procedure for the implementation of the audit with external audit firms. They monitor closely the implementation of the audits, the audit advancements. I cannot provide you an exact timing, an exact duration for the examination. It depends how much in deep, how many projects they have to audit. But you should always consider that in between one step and the other, there is a lot of desk review and revision of documents that are collected by the auditors. So it's not necessarily that if an audit takes place in 1 week, the audit fieldwork, then automatically the week after we will come to a reporting and closure stage. It might take months, a couple of months, before arriving to a preliminary audit report being shared to you, because a lot of quality review is done by the Common Audit Service. So I'm sorry, I cannot provide you an exact figure for that. What I can tell to you is that since the letter of announcement, you should consider at least 14-15 months for the closure of the audit. Then I have a question: in which cases Olaf is involved, or in or after an audit? The Olaf normally is engaged with an investigation if some suspicious fraud emerge from whatever source of information, not necessarily the audit. So the Olaf might be involved even outside an audit procedure. An audit procedure, nevertheless, can provide information that triggers this process. How often audits are organized? Well, good question, because indeed, I should assure you that it's a small part of the population of cost claims that is a relatively small part of the population that is under audit, and each year BBI-JU receives from cash the request to launch these audits with a target closure of the following year. So each year there is a sampling which has been done for the selection of audits, and if I refer to the General Horizon 2020 expectation under the regulation is to have 7% of the population of beneficiaries being audited by the end of the program. You encourage to, then I will switch to the next questions. I think I answered to this. You encourage to seek support during the indicative audit program. Who should potentially be addressed? Actually, my advice is to seek the support of the indicative audit program when you want to understand what is the auditor going to do, how is he going to do, what is supposed to check, also in cooperation with you, especially because sometimes there are indicative procedures, and when I say indicative, this provides the reasonable freedom for the auditor to extend his evidence finding through dialogue, by the dialogue he can have with you when you are able to provide additional evidence. So my advice is, in case of doubts, before the closing meeting, have a look to the indicative audit program, especially on the points where you have findings.
Okay. The next question here is, can you request a mock audit to see how you're doing and what to improve without any consequence?
I don't think that this is in the current set of the ex post audit strategy. I'm sure not. And you have also to understand that audits, they have their own costs in terms of money and human resources being implemented there. And we do not want to overcharge our beneficiaries with excessive and not useful audit burden. So really put an effort to gain the best in the most efficient way from the audit exercises.
Okay. Thank you very much, Albert. I see that there are no more questions coming in, so I'd like to thank you again for this very useful information about a topic that we might not always hear, but is very relevant once an audit actually occurs. So then we will now move to the last presentation of today, which is about communication guidelines, and I will gladly give the floor to our next speaker.
Thank you, Dieter. Good afternoon to everyone. I am Ana Costa, and I'm part of the communication team of BBI-JU. Thank you for still being on that side. First, I will very quickly explain why it is important to communicate about your project and to disseminate your results. And afterwards, I will go through the specific BBI-JU communication guidelines in what concerns the acknowledgement of funding, how to use the logos, and how to maximize your impact through social media. So I think it is safe to say that our beneficiaries know they must promote the project activities and results. Communicating your project is far more important than you think. You can create consumer demand, you can impact policies, you can find new investors and partners, and I could continue. For that end, communication must be done in a strategic and effective manner and must target several different stakeholders. This can be the media, the public in general, the policymakers, the research and academic community. It is not only advisable to communicate about the project, it is mandatory, as it is laid down in the Articles 29 and 38 of the Annotated Model Grant Agreement. As I previously mentioned, communication activities must be carried down in a strategic and professional manner. This is really important. It is important to ensure the project is professionally managed. This can be done through third parties, through one of the partners of your project. That concrete goals and objectives are defined in the beginning of the communication action. The message is well defined and speaks to the chosen audience through the chosen medium. And then in the end, you assess what were the outcomes of it and what are the lessons learned also for the future. We can say that dissemination and communication go hand in hand, but they have some differences. In terms of dissemination consists in the disclosure of results, and this is mostly from a scientific and technological point of view, and the communication consists in promoting your project actions and results targeting different audiences, stakeholders. Communication actions should always mention the involvement and role of BBI-JU in the project. What would be the situation if BBI-JU doesn't exist? In what manner are we being able to foster the development of bio-based industries in Europe? These are some questions that can and should be answered by you. As just mentioned, dissemination is often aimed at, for example, other researchers working in the area of the proposed project, while communication is aimed at promoting the project to a non-specialized audience. In principle, some dissemination activities, such as presenting project results, during scientific conferences, stakeholder forums, could also be seen as relevant communication activity as they promote the project to a relevant and targeted audience. However, every project has other relevant target groups, and thus different communication activities must apply. Now, in terms of specific BBI guidelines, all your communication activities must include, obviously, the BBI-JU logo, the EU emblem with the text referring to the link to Horizon 2020 funding, the BIC logo, and the involvement and role of BBI-JU in the project. How to use these different logos? As you see in the presentation, all these logos and emblems must be present. We advise to have the BBI-JU logo more prominent than the others to reinforce our role as catalyzer and funding agency. Some of you may notice now that the BBI-JU logo displayed in the screen is different from the one you are currently using. This is because we have made some updates in our visual identity and we are shifting towards use of this shorter version of the logo. In the case of materials already printed, you can obviously still have the old one, but from now on, please use the version you see on the screen. This applies to materials currently being developed and all the digital platforms where obviously it is easier to make already the change. Project-related communication and dissemination materials of all types, as I said, must always mention the funding received from the BBI-JU program through H2020. This applies to all materials produced by beneficiaries which can relate and come from the project. I really emphasize that this is a legal obligation laid down in your grant agreement, and obviously if a beneficiary breaches any of these obligations, the grant may be reduced. So I think this is something very important to keep in mind. One effective way to acknowledge the funding from H2020 is by using stickers or different text boxes in your communication brochures, websites, etc., so that they are clearly visible with the text you see on the screen. And now passing to another very important tool of communication nowadays, social media. We have been insisting quite a lot on this lately with many of you. Social media has become essential and must as well be used in a strategic and regular manner. Possible channels that most of you must know are Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, for example. As you may have noticed, the biggest online presence of BBI is on Twitter, complemented by accounts on LinkedIn and YouTube. So, in terms of Twitter, currently around 60% of our projects are very active on Twitter, and we can tell you that this makes a big difference when passing out project messages to a wide audience. So please make sure also to tag our Twitter account at BBI 2020 when posting something. We'll make sure that we can amplify your message. Then on LinkedIn, also tag our LinkedIn profile. And I would also like to invite you to join our LinkedIn group. You can use it as a forum to discuss ideas, to promote your activities. You are free to post within obviously the group rules, so please join the group. And last, the YouTube account. We have a channel where we post BBI videos produced by us, and where we also have a playlist where we can add your own videos. Please don't hesitate in sharing them with us. Now, good things can arise from your collaboration with us. Please send your publications and media articles to our team. Send your logos, send your materials such as leaflets, brochures. Tell us when you are going to participate in events so that we can also advertise it through our social media and newsletter, for example. And especially, please share with us product samples. This can be very crucial in passing the message both about BBI and advertising your project. You can contact us via the email on the screen whenever you need something from our team. We are very happy to help. And now, to finish my presentation, I'll leave you a couple of useful sources where you can find more advice and guidelines on how to make the most of your project communication actions. All these guidelines are available in our website under the tab Participate Project Management, and also the logos can be downloaded there in a high and low resolution. And thank you for listening to me. I'm now open for questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna. So if you have any specific questions, I see that there's already one question that we can answer. Will the presentation be available as PDF by tomorrow? That's a very clear question. I hope so, yes. With a bit of luck, we'll be able to do that. It depends a bit because one of the things that we will do is we will now go through all the questions that you have sent us. We will see if, let's say, some of our slides might be able to be changed slightly in order to clarify some of the questions that you might have asked. So if that doesn't take that much space, then we'll definitely publish it. If it's tomorrow, might be a bit tricky. In any case, the idea is, if everything goes well, we will also have been able to record this this presentation today. We will post the recording as well. We will post the PDF version, including all the links. Tomorrow might be a bit tricky, but definitely the aim is to do that somewhere next week. Any other questions specifically related to dissemination and communication about your BBI-JU projects? You're still here with, let's see, more than 70 people. So if there are no specific questions, going once, going twice. Okay, then there is one. There are a couple of questions coming in now.
So how do you choose inputs from projects to your BBI newsletter? Can we propose some input for specific dates? We choose by what is relevant at the moment. So, for example, the next newsletter is scheduled to be sent now in December. So if there are upcoming congresses that we can publicize, we will obviously do so. It really depends on what is newest or what can be interesting also to our stakeholders receiving the newsletter, but definitely send us whatever you have communication related or participation in events, and either newsletter, either social media will make sure to advertise it. And then we have a second question: does result only refer to innovations or any kind of data information coming out of the project?
Go ahead.
Result can be the scientific part. Obviously, if you are not, you don't have to protect it because of intellectual property reasons. You should make sure you disseminate it. This can be done, as I said, through participation in conferences, poster presentations. But it can also be something related with the expected impact. So if you reach a major milestone from the project that you think can be interesting for a wider audience, this is obviously interesting. So results, and also taking into account how wide our projects are in terms of scope and objectives, this can be really a lot of things. Dieter was going to add something?
No, not specifically, because it was more linked to a similar question that was also asked. Are technical results of the project relevant for the newsletter? It depends. So we, what Anna showed in her presentation as well, that we have a lot of different communication channels, ranging from social media to our newsletter to, we also give presentations in other conferences as well. And depending on the topic of that presentation, we might highlight one or more of our ongoing projects as good examples of relevant projects there. So in that sense, yes, but it doesn't mean that if everyone starts sending us all the technical results that we will include them all in our newsletter. I think no one is waiting for a newsletter of 20 pages. So this is why definitely send it to, that was also the question, communications with an S at the end, at bbi.euro, is it Europe? Europa.eu. And then we will discuss and we will see what is the most appropriate communication channel to use that to also promote your project, because again, it's a win-win situation. The better that your projects are promoted, the better for you, but the more visibility that your project gets, it's also good for us as BBI-JU.
We have another question about the frequency of the newsletter and if there is a fixed date. There isn't a fixed date in the month, but it's sent in a quarterly basis. So generally in March, June, mid-March, mid-June, mid-September, and mid-December. This obviously we can sometimes change the dates if in light of any big announcement like the opening of the call, etc. But generally these are the core dates.
Okay. Okay, we'll just wait if there are some other questions that are coming in.
We have another question saying, what is the next joint marketing campaign of BBI with another organization promoting innovations in bioeconomy? I guess this is related to events, your question. You can find all the upcoming events where we'll have an active role, either speaking or exhibiting, in our website in the section events. So all the events until the end of the year are currently displayed there. And the ones we will participate in the next year will be available once we publish the annual work plan as well.
That list includes diverse types of participations of BBIGU. It can be that we are a speaker in a specific conference. It can be that we have a specific booth somewhere as well. It can be that we're involved in another way as well, but definitely indeed, as Anna said, go to our website, main menu, events, and there you have the whole list. Okay. There's a question as well on how specific must the reporting about communications activities be and how best to record and report them, for example, photos from events or other things. Then we're, for example, linking it to deliverables. If one of your deliverables is we will have a final conference to link to our project, how to submit a deliverable that fully captures that. Whenever you're asking yourself that question, try to put yourself in the position of BBIGU, but also of an external auditor, and ask yourself the question, can this deliverable convince me that this activity has indeed been carried out? And linked to that as well, are the costs that are then reported in the VITA periodic reports, are they in line with these activities? So, for example, if you have created your website, one page with only your URL of the website might be a bit more limited. Why? Because remember also you have the obligation to keep all the justification documents of all your projects until let's say 5 years until after the payment of the balance, which means that suppose that 3 years after your project the URL you archive it and then there's an audit, then you don't have any information anymore. However, if you take the when you're submitting your deliverable, and what you do is you give the structure of the website, you give the URL of the website, you give maybe a couple of screenshots of the website, then you have a justification document showing that you have indeed carried out that type of deliverable. Similarly with organizing conferences, the website, that's good, but that's not enough. Also explain indeed with a couple of pictures, the agenda, the speakers, maybe some outcomes if you had some sort of a meeting minutes or a report that was written in line with this conference. These are the types of elements that we're looking for. Again, we're not looking for you to describe everything in 200 pages. The main question to ask yourself is, can I convince BBIGU, can I convince an external auditor that what I said that I did has actually been carried out?
We have another question. Will you also put the project-related events, example, stakeholder events, in your event calendar? How can we make it to your event calendar? So the event calendar in our website currently displays only the events where BBI, one member of our team, is speaking or exhibiting. What we can do for you in terms of advertisement is to have it in our social media, and this will make it massively. We can have several posts advertising that you are going to be present at an event. We can retweet your information. We can also include it occasionally in the newsletter, again following the guidelines that Peter just mentioned for it. But in terms of project events, also for a question of management of our own resources, time management, let's say, the project ones will make it only to our social media, which I'm saying only, but it's obviously a good channel to advertise about it.
Okay. Any other questions related to communication? Going once, going twice. Yes. So the question is, individual sharing of scientific articles on social media is welcome, or do you prefer that they be communicated to the profile of BBI or the project for its communication sharing?
I'm trying to understand the question. I don't know if you mean that this should be done in your own channels or if this should be done in BBI channels. In my opinion, you should do it in your channels. We will make sure to amplify it by retweeting ourselves. Obviously, if it is something important, you should also send it either to us, via email or even through Twitter or LinkedIn messages, and then we will be able to also communicate about it. I hope I'm answering the question.
Okay, yes. So, okay, well, in any case, and that's maybe also important to when we finalize, let's say, today's presentation, conclusions and next steps. That's only one slide, rest assured. That is actually also in line with what was just shared. If you have any additional questions, let's say on a general level, please email info@. If you have some questions specifically related to communication, email communications@bbi.europa.eu, Europa with an A at the end, not an E. But for project-specific questions, please contact your project officer, but always via your coordinator. So please, we have a mixed audience here today. Some of you are coordinators, some of you are representatives of beneficiaries of coordinators. Please always go through your coordinator, because if not, then no one knows anymore who is contacting who and who has asked what to who. The webinar, as we said, the hope is that indeed it will be made available. Right now, I still see the recording button, so it should be okay. The recorded version, plus also the presentations in PDF format, including the hyperlinks that you saw. We will also still, before Christmas, that's the idea, to create an updated frequently asked questions list for coordinators based on the questions that we've received via the webinar and some other elements that we've already briefly highlighted here. This document about in-kind, in-cash additional investments. We also discussed briefly a Word version of the periodic reporting template that BBIG has created with some questions for you to think about when you're writing the periodic report. So they will also all be linked in this updated frequently asked questions list for coordinators. And then also next week you will receive an email from us asking to update the 9 continuous reporting Sigma tabs. So going back to our first presentation, why is that? As we said, these are the tabs that you can continuously update, but we as BBIGU were also requested to write an annual activity report. And of course, we want to include in our annual activity report of 2018 the most up-to-date data. Therefore, we will ask you via email to update these 9 continuous reporting tabs with data until the 31st of December 2018. The deadline will be somewhere in January. This way we can then extract that data and populate our annual activity reports with relevant data, with up-to-date data, as to show what the current status of BBIGU and partially then also of bioeconomy in Europe is. So that's already a little announcement that you will receive next week. And actually from our side, that is it. Thank you very much for having been with us for a bit over 3 hours. If, again, you still have additional questions, feel free to send them via info@, also, again, via your coordinator. And if, let's say, in the near future and based on the specific questions, it could be that we see, well, there might be a need for another webinar dedicated to one or more other topics. We're always interested to hear your opinions about that. If we can inform you, that's good for everyone, for us as BBIG, but definitely, hopefully also for you as project participants. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again next time.